Is the strike coming on Iran? I mean, it would be a time since it has been almost 3 weeks since Iran has sent over or almost 200 ballistic missiles or around 200 ballistic missiles. I keep seeing different numbers being reported. But let's say about 200 missiles at Israel, and Israel hasn't been responding now. But something that has recently happened, and I think we'll just go to the video directly because it will be a nice starting point. A few reporters have been asking Biden certain questions, so we'll just play a short part of that.
Do you have a good understanding right now what Israel is going to do in response to Iran's October 1st attacks and when they will actually respond to Iran?
Yes and yes.
Can you tell us?
No and no.
So I'm not sure how much heard it was, but the question was, do you know when and how Israel will respond against Iran? Biden answered yes and yes. She asked, "Can you tell us?" He said no and no. So pretty clear. And we also have reports from different sources within the Biden administration that there is a reached agreement about the general idea of what the strike is going to be. I believe the specifics of it. So let's say, let's say they agreed on attacking the oil sites. So they might not specifically know how or how it's going to be, but they've agreed on that general idea. We'll talk about specifically what we think this general idea that has been agreed upon might be. But this is where we're currently at. We might there is finally some agreement. We've heard from both sides. We've heard from Israeli side that basically they didn't. They were not like sort of ignoring the problem. They were focusing on it, and I think the focusing on it, at least from my understanding, is the crucial American support. The more I sort of look into this situation, the more I see that basically Israel, without the American support, is pretty much not able to strike within Iran. Or at least do a substantial strike against certain sides. They can we've seen they can assassinate people, but doing an aerial operation over Iran, going with planes to Iran and striking specific sites is a much different feat than assassinating a certain people. So welcome to the Daily Objective. Joining me today is James. James, what do you think? Did it take too long to finally reach an agreement? And what do you think? Why do you think it was so long?
Because Israel, I think this time really is paying heed to American policymakers. Uh, America did not want and sent every signal they possibly could to Israel not, for example, to go into Rafah. And they did eventually go into Rafah, and we can see they got Sinwar. That would not have happened had Israel paid attention to policymakers in DC. But I think this time it's different. I think that you're right. The way Biden sounded right there sounds a lot more confident that in fact Israel has been consulted. American policymakers, oh, well, we're consulting closely with our allies in Israel. This time, and even if Israel is not signaling to America or the West what they're going to do, nonetheless, this time I think they are much more doing that. And I fear that you're correct. It's not the immediate need for bunker buster bombs that's so critical. It's the fact that America is starting to threaten to withhold weapons and weapon systems. Now, they are providing defensive systems, and indeed, new defensive weapon systems are on their way, perhaps in direct need for what Israel's going to have to need when they attack Iran. I think they will attack Iran directly. Unfortunately, in listening to Biden, who has simply made, as a matter of principle, not attacking their nuclear weapons program sites, not attacking the Iranian oil fields. And so I think that those conditions that Biden has been placing on them, unfortunately, will probably condition, although they should ignore that. If they can, they should go after the nuclear sites. If they can, they should go after the oil sites. If they can, they should try and take out the leadership in Tehran, in my view. But I think it's much more likely to be the sites from which Iranians and Iranian proxies have been firing missiles on Israel and upon American bases. I think those missile sites are mostly launching sites are mostly going to be the targets because they've been consulting. I do not, for the life of me, and I will never understand why the United States is protecting Iran's nuclear weapon program after two huge ballistic missile attacks directly on Israel. The idea that these, and think of it, as I keep saying, there were craters made in Israel in the last ballistic missile attack. Can you imagine if one of those missiles had had a nuclear warhead on it? I think it's absolutely insane that we're not going after the nuclear missile program facilities. That is critical to the regional stability. You talk about regional instability. That it's crucial to not ensconcing Iran in the minds of foreign leaders, at least, as a permanent country that has to we just have to accept as a fact of reality. And I think the security of the West, and particularly Israel, is directly threatened by it. And so I cannot, for the life of me, understand why those nuclear facilities are being protected by American policymakers. The oil facilities are an obvious no-brainer. Where do you think the revenue comes from that gives the material support to Hezbollah, its affiliates, Hamas, the Houthis, and by the way, buys those missiles that have been fired on Israel now twice? Do you agree with me, Daniel, as to the nature of the probable counterattack?
Sorry, can you ask the question again? I'm not sure what you mean.
I was saying how it is because Biden appears to be confident and Israel is cooperating. Do you think that I'm correct in saying that the nuclear facilities are off limits, the oil facilities are off limits, even leadership is probably off limits, and it'll just be the missile sites they've been using in their recent attacks, either in Iran or through their proxies?
Yeah, so I think whenever I look at politics, I really put a high amount of confidence in basically looking at what the people want and looking at the opinion pollings. And I think, although I do always criticize Trump for not doing anything against Iran, I think I can understand it to idea that it's just unpopular. Any action against Iran is unpopular. Any action against in the Middle East itself has been unpopular. I mean, even if you just go back, just to do, like, let's say the Iraq war, you had to pick one nation that like everybody could like go around, and that was like right after 9/11 when there was like a large amount. So I think it's simply the fact that it's like so incredibly unpopular, then basically there is no wiggle room. That's why I think basically the politicians have been preferring the nuclear deal with Iran, because that's it's a much different way, when you just say, well, we are just lifting sanctions on them and they will not develop nuclear weapons. When that is sort of put, that's much easier for basically people to understand than we will basically engage in an active conflict against the nation. So just to go back about when you talked about, I guess we can go into what might be the actual target. So something that basically when the attack happened, so like almost 3 weeks ago, for a little bit there was no real direction when it came from Biden. I mean, he didn't like have like any specific. Then it became clear, he started saying that no nuclear sites, and that became basically like a point. And then it became no oil sites either. And that has been basically the sort of policy before Biden and Netanyahu had a call. They had a call between the two of them on October 10th. And then afterwards, I think there's still. So this is something I'm not really understanding, and I'm wondering. And it's good that I don't understand it, because that means I don't really know what's going to happen, which means at least it's not public knowledge. But basically, something that Iran has been doing has been signaling pretty much to all of the Middle East that any attack on Iran will receive a retaliation. And I think this was a big sort of signal towards, let's say, our allies in the region, talking about like Qatar and Saudi Arabia. I mean, like official allies of the United States and nations that have American bases, basically telling them, don't allow an Israeli attack from your sides because we will retaliate. And I think after that was said, Biden came out saying that he will also not support any attack from American bases. That wasn't specified recently. So that's why I'm really switching, because I think there still is something that Israel is getting from it, and there is something that I think America has sort of banded on. And I'm wondering, it might just be, so you mentioned the air defense. Basically, what was sent to Israel was THAAD, which stands for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. And I believe Israel is asking for one more. Them asking for it, I mean, there is a question if it relates specifically to this attack, because it might mean, but again, then it's sort of like if retaliation on Iran is not gonna be that strong, let's say just attacking the missile sites, like no oil sites, no nuclear sites, then I imagine even Iranian retaliation afterwards is not gonna be as strong. So why do you need more defense systems? But maybe it's just a general sort of long-term agreement. Maybe something I've said, let's do our predictions. I don't think it will be nuclear sites, and I don't think it will be like any even like high-end assassinations. Something I've been saying for a while is I don't think it will be oil sites because of how much it was said against it. But now I'm giving it like 20% that they might hit some oil sites, or they might hit them in some capacity, just because I really cannot see. But again, there's just so many variables, because also when it comes to Israel, as I've been saying, I don't think Israel can afford or can basically manage any attack against Iran by itself. So it needs American support. And now the question is, to what extent basically Israel is sort of compromising on a strong response to Iran, just so there is some response against Iran, basically with the US support. What do you think, James?
Israel has F-15s and F-16s and really sophisticated missiles themselves. I think, and they have in the past attacked sites in Iran and before that in Iraq, where they just independently attacked those countries. But I fear that you're right, that this time that they believe that they tactically need and certainly politically need American support for a direct attack that's going to be more than, say, a targeted, taking out of Hanea in Tehran. To do something more than that, I unfortunately fear that they believe they need both tactically and politically American support for that, at least in principle, before they could do that. And that's unfortunate. So if I were a betting man, I would agree with you. They're unfortunately not going to go after those nuclear sites. That's the least likely at this point. Again, I don't think they're going to go after the oil sites, given Biden's happy confidence at this point. And I think it might be a targeted set of assassinations. That might be good. But I think it will be, as I indicated earlier, the missile site launching locations from which the attacks on Israel have been launched, and perhaps Iranian proxy sites in the region where attacks have been launched and launched against Americans. But I think those are the likely, unfortunately, the most likely parts of it. How devastating it is going to be, it will probably be far more effective than Iran's attacks on Israel, and that will suffice. Everyone will say, oh, take the huge win now. That suffices, when it does nothing like suffice in terms of taking out the problem. Let me ask another question now. When do you think it'll happen, Daniel?
Yeah, I think when you originally asked me, I was silent for about half a minute because I don't think we can know. I think there's just so little information about it we had. If you asked me, I think the attack happened on October 1st. If you ask me, how long will it take for Israel to respond? Uh, I wouldn't have guessed, like, we are 3 weeks in, and there is still no response. That might have been just from my lack of knowledge and understanding of, I think I was overestimating Israel's ability after the Hezbollah, after what they've done to Hezbollah, now after also what they've done to Sinwar. But I think that it's just because of how far Iran is and what it takes to do like such an operation. Again, it's an someone there is and now I can't remember his name. But the uh, Ryan Macbeth, I think he's like a analyst. He did an basically like an analysis of how and potential Israeli attack could happen, and it would be very dangerous and would take a lot. So that's why I think there was no attack. That I think there is a will in Israel to attack. I don't think we are at a point, when we criticize Israel for basically not being strong enough, even when they could be. I mean, you've mentioned Rafah. Basically, Israel went into Rafah despite Americans' basically problems with it, but that was sort of the political support. They didn't have the American political support, but they didn't need the actual material support when it came to that specific operation. But I think it's much different here. I think they do need basically both of them. They both need sort of the American sanction and American support. So I named this episode Israel's greatest ally, but in quotation marks, because yeah, that's pretty much where we are. I think, obviously, America is still Israel's greatest ally, but it's one of those allies which you really hope you would have someone actually more confident in you, someone who would actually, I mean, not even, Ayn Rand talks about self-interest, and there is an American self-interest when it comes to Iran. So this is not even just America help Israel because we want you to help Israel. No, Iran has been acting against America for decades now. I mean, you don't even have to look far. If you look at the even all the militias Iran is supporting all over the Middle East, Houthis attacking the international trading. Even if you go long back, the hostages, during the Trump's presidency, after he killed Soleimani, or after Soleimani was killed. It's kind of weird saying by him, but yeah, after he basically ordered Soleimani to get killed, there was a response from Iran where Iran attacked American bases, and again, there was like America has an interest in doing something about Iran, and the fact that we are at a sort of scenario where there is just no willingness to do anything about Iran is again very disappointing from Israel's greatest ally.
Yeah, with an ally like that, we're not a very good friend. In fact, we're not. For all the talk in October, when America said Israel has a right to defend itself, for all the talk that, even back in October, back in January, Biden was saying how Hamas was diverting all that aid, and that any aid that went to Hamas, if it was stopped, that would be cool and okay. But now America is taking a totally different stance on that too. You've got to just be giving aid indiscriminately to Gaza, even if Hamas gets it. One of the great problems with the way America reacted after 9/11, now this was 23 years ago, was that we fought the wrong wars in the wrong way. And we sort of shot our whatever political chance we had, both domestically in terms of America's own willingness to do wars. And because those wars turned out to be the ghastly things they were, because frankly, the way we didn't really fight them. One of these, Israel type wars where you're trying to avoid collateral damage and civilians casualties, and you try and make friends, and you do a proxy war, and you let Osama bin Laden escape through Tora Bora with most of Al Qaeda in Afghanistan, and then you go after Iraq primarily because we can get a political coalition easiest against them, rather than going after Iran, the number one supporter of terrorism that we'd already had decades worth of reason to go to war against. And of course, you left this huge power vacuum when you take out Iraq that Iran is happy to fill. So, yeah, it was a disastrous set of policies. And what that has had, the political effect of doing here in America, is making America less likely to want to go to war at all in the Middle East. So if you were to ask the ordinary American, no, we don't want an all-out war with Iran right now. But they looked at the 20-year meaningless war in which American and British young people got killed for no reason for a period of 20 years. They looked at the disastrous way we handled Iraq, and now look at what's controlling Iraq and what's going on in Iraq. So Americans didn't see the great, wonderful effect of what these terrible, poorly chosen wars, and still worse, terribly fought wars, got them. It got them nothing but dead young people and no real progress against Islamic fascism or jihadism at all, did it? And so there's a widespread view in the West. We don't want to go to war with another Middle Eastern country. And so Iran is kind of off limits. We don't want to escalate. We don't want to increase tensions, even if American interests, international trade, and Israel gets repeatedly attacked. Iran says once they destroy the Zionist entity, they will go after the great Satan America. Now, given that overt intention, and given the fact that they are the number one sponsors of terrorism, given the fact that they have been responsible for killing hundreds of Americans, given the fact that they're getting a nuclear weapon, you would think that the United States would be, in their self-interest, a little more directed in a more efficient and direct way against Iran. Unfortunately, since October 7th, since 9/11, indeed for the last 45 years, America has ignored act of war after act of war after act of war coming from the Islamic Republic of Iran. We have a direct interest in this. We should be actively helping Israel take out the governments in Iran and Lebanon. That seems to me a no-brainer, but I do not think we're going to get anything like that. Let me ask another question before we leave. Do you think that Israel could be waiting and hoping for Trump to get elected in so far as they might be able to do stronger reactions to Iran and their proxies?
Well, you have to, even if that happens, that's a long way. That's about 3 months from now when, Trump is officially in the office.
Yeah.
So you still have, either way, you still have how much is it? Yeah, 3 months, basically.
Yeah.
You still have about 3 months of Biden. And although technically it could be different even when the election happens, because
change the mood.
Yeah, to large extent, it's hard to judge Biden's action and what is sort of like really trying to sort of better the odds for Kamala Harris, and what is just sort of like his own thing. So when the election actually does happen, he sort of is unshackled from that. It doesn't mean he will translate into some sort of hawk against Iran. Not to mention, there's also a bit of a precedence of basically not doing big actions after you are basically technically you are still in office, but the new president there is a president elect who is supposed to. You don't really do big things when it comes to that. I don't think. I mean. We'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens. I don't think that's a good choice when it comes to Israel. There is one episode we still have ready, which we still haven't done, and it actually has a number about 3 30 less than the current TDO number, but it's Bibi's election gamble. We might still do it at some point, but it was a big topic, I think, about a month ago, basically, that Netanyahu is sort of seemingly just not doing anything and sort of just waiting to see who gets elected, and sort of based his policy on that, which I think is really improper. If Trump does get elected, and we'll see more aggressive action, or at least more aggressive support, or support for Israel to do more aggressive actions, it would be great. If Kamala gets elected, and we'll see much more, let's say, even much more push against those actions, even than Biden, which again I don't think is unbelievable to see. Either way, Israel should do the best it can do right now, and even with Biden.
Exactly. They should be ignoring the policymakers in DC, in Europe, shouldn't they? And they should just do it on their own, whatever the idiots in the West, infected by altruism and cultural relativism and everything that we as objectivists know is hog tying and tying the hands of a real response here, an effective response that would actually put an end to war rather than put us in a situation of more perpetual war. Yeah.
So we have a few minutes left, so just a few reports. So something that has happened, there was a drone strike, or sort of drone attack on Netanyahu's apartment. Nor Netanyahu nor his wife were at home at the time,
Good.
but it was recorded that that there was an explosion and something happened. Luckily, no one was injured, at least the last time I checked. But it was, again, very scary situation. I think Netanyahu, I don't have his quote, but I think he said something like, I will not be sort of put down by this attack. I will not lie. I will still be relentless, I think was the proper quote. Raza reminds me, he's in the chat. He says, Bibi's election gamble was the episode we were going to do on the day of the pager explosions. So I think that was the big reason why we put it off. I was trying to remember where it was exactly, because it seemed to like he was waiting, and then this happened, as well as many other things. So I don't think it is the current. I don't think it is sort of like the current policy of Netanyahu. Maybe it was at some point, and he himself realized it really, it's just, you're just waiting too long, and he decided to go in. Although I've also heard that apparently when the pager happened, apparently it might have happened because some Hezbollah people started suspecting that there might be something wrong. So whichever way it is, it doesn't look like right now. It seems like Netanyahu is sort of doing the best he can with his within sort of the limit he's allowed. So I don't have that many bad words. I haven't had that many bad words about him for a few weeks. So let's keep it going. Just maybe wrapping up with this. There's a report by Khan, public broadcaster, that the political echelon has decided on the targets. And then Netanyahu had approved the targets. So,
well, see, if Bibi and Gallant have already decided the targets, whatever it is, it's in the bag.
But from my understanding, even if the specific targets are picked, the American administration doesn't know about the actual specific plans. They just agree to the general idea. So just to sort of wrap up with that. And okay, we also have a few super chats. So let me. Oh, can I not see them? Oh, we have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. We have a super chat from Wes. Thank you so much. And a super chat from PC. He says, London had pro-Hamas protests with people crying for Sinwar. Well, it's Saturday. If it hasn't changed, I believe there's always a protest on Saturday.
Crying for one of the masterminds of October 7th. Think about that.
You actually, good that you reminded me. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, I believe he was the moderate candidate. condemned the killing of Sinwar and said his death would not interfere with Islamic resistance. So it was nice to hear from the moderate side of Iran.
Those are your moderate Islamists, okay, folks? So those are the soft cell Islamists who are mourning the death of this monster behind horrible atrocities, systematic sexual violence, mutilation of bodies, the killing of children, the taking of hostages, a surprise attack on civilians in their homes and at a concert. One of the most horrific acts of our time, ladies and gentlemen. And to shed a tear for that man is truly morally perverse.
Someone is saying that Pezeshkian is not really moderate. I am joking, obviously. Even when it comes to Iranian presidents, they are handpicked, or the candidates are handpicked by
Can't
Ayatollah.
even run for a president of Iran without the Ayatollah's blessing.
So yeah, it's sort of that idea of controlled opposition almost that you put on. It actually reminds me, fun story. I always bring examples from my own life. In the Slovak, when it came to the Czechoslovak Communist Party, it wasn't actually a single party. It was a popular front which had Christian democratic parties in them. It had a party called the Freedom Party, although they always got just below enough seats to have the majority, which again, sort of, it's something you oftentimes see, the idea of controlled opposition, that basically in authoritarian states, opposition is allowed, similar to, I think, in Russia, you have like the opposition parties, but I think it is pretty much the only goal is to put on a facade that there is some choice, there is some different ways where people could potentially vote, but it's done basically just it doesn't have any real power.
Right. That's where the term straw man comes from, by the way. When we talk about a straw man argument, it has its roots in politics. The politicians in ancient Roman Republic would put up a slate of candidates, one of whom was too extreme, so they knew he wouldn't get elected, but the other guy was set up anyway for the election. Or they would bribe the candidate on one side or another, bribe the electorate on one side or another, and the other candidates were basically, quote, straw man candidates. So that has been the way authoritarian governments have been working for a long, long time.
Yeah, and so just to summarize, we finally have a potentially attack coming. We have no idea where it might come. It's good that we don't know. We shouldn't know. I don't think it will be soon, but I might be wrong. So either way, we'll see. We'll see what where it might exactly go. Again, I think both me and James agree it will probably not go beyond what was already sort of disallowed by Biden. So no all sides, no nuclear sites. So it most likely will be a big response, but I would be happy if I'm surprised.
Let's
And
hope that we're both pleasantly surprised with a much bigger, more significant attack. There must be a direct, kinetic, violent attack against Iran in the wake of two severe ballistic missile attacks on the state of Israel. Otherwise, the entire principle of self-defense has been thrown in the waste bin.
So just quickly to wrap up, someone in the chat is asking if you are objectivist, why do you care so much about Israel? I think when it comes to Israel, and this has been also relatively clear when it came to Ukraine and Russia, but it's much more clear when it comes to Israel and the Palestinians. You have one side which is civilized, which is Western, which is modern, which is much more aligned with sort of the objectivist view of the government, and you have one side which is honestly full of savages, basically complete rejection of civilization, hating on civilization, complete rejection of any Western values, and a commitment to the destruction of them. Yet the world refuses to see it for it is. And I think that's one way where objectivists have basically the only answer, where no one is really able, because of the predominant altruistic morality, no one is really able to give an answer.
Correct. Objectivism opposes this idea that savages have a right to self-determination, that if you don't have a right to vote yourself into dictatorship at all, ever. ever. That doesn't make you legitimate because it's democratic and the people want it. And the Islamic culture today represents everything that objectivism opposes. They are for the destruction of civilization. They are savage medieval mystics. Savage medieval mystics. Try and be a feminist or gay in Iran or in Gaza today. No, they're anti-civilization. They're racist, collectivist, based on their mysticism. They are altruists, willing to martyr themselves, like religious fanatics often are, in their collectivist, racist cause. And they want to bring down civilization as such. And they want a worldwide caliphate. They represent all the forces systematically across the board that objectivism opposes, from its metaphysics and epistemology all the way to its politics. The Islamic world is anti-objectivist, and Israel, for all its flaws, and by the way, Great Britain and the United States have plenty of flaws in their own liberal democracies. But for all its flaws, Israel is an island of civilization, a comparative respect for individual rights, and the resulting effect of having a technological, forward-looking, modern society. Israel is an island, if you will, of civilization, surrounded by savagery. And that is why Ayn Rand herself was a strong supporter of Israel, especially in the 1970s up to her death, when Islamism was growing terribly in the region. So Ayn Rand was very much a supporter of Israel for the reasons I articulated. Nothing could be more anti-objectivist than the dominant culture in the Islamic world today that you'll find in places like Iran and Gaza.
Someone in the chat is asking, is saying we should do an episode on self-determination. I believe we have something like that in the plan. I think I have something on that in the notes. So yeah, I think it will do. It will be a very interesting episode, and I particularly love that because the idea of self-determination is rooted in history, in especially early history of my own nation. So I've been interested in it for a long time.
A great episode. Yeah.
And with that, thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And hopefully we'll see a strike against Iran tonight. But until we see each other again, bye-bye.
Be safe.